So if you book a flight from Vancouver to Calgary, it takes, what, about an hour?
Yeah, I mean, roughly an hour. Maybe a bit more if you factor in taxi.
All right. And you walk into an airport, you get inside this, pressurized metal tube, and you just endure a bit of turbulence.
Exactly. It's purely functional.
Yeah. And the entire design philosophy of that experience is basically to erase the space between those two cities as fast as humanly possible.
Right. The geography beneath you is literally just an obstacle to get past.
Exactly. But you're joining us today for this deep dive to explore a travel landscape that completely inverts that logic.
Completely turns it upside down.
Right. We are looking at a machine where people from over 100 different countries pay thousands of dollars to take that exact same geographic journey.
But they intentionally stretch it out.
Yes. They stretch it out into this sprawling 2-day event.
It is, it's the absolute definition of intentional friction.
Intentional friction. I like that.
Yeah, because it represents a fundamental shift in how we perceive distance. Modern commerce sort of, conditions us to consume distance at human speed.
Or like hyper-accelerated digital speed.
Right, exactly. But the experience we are deconstructing today, it forces you to slow down and consume distance at geological speed.
I love that phrase, geological speed. And that's really our mission for this deep dive today.
It's a massive topic.
It is. We are going to unpack how a literal piece of heavy industrial infrastructure, a train rolling on iron tracks, was engineered into an 8-time winner of the world's leading travel experience by train.
Which is just a staggering title.
It really is. And we're pulling from this incredibly deeply researched 2026 operational overview by Yvon Jr. Blanchette of ARIA Voyages.
Yeah, it's a fantastic guide. Focuses on the Rocky Mountaineer.
Right. So we're looking at the physics, the history, and the economics of how this operation actually works.
And critically, we need to analyze a highly urgent situation.
Yeah, this is time sensitive.
Yep.
There is a situation happening right now in 2026 regarding the permanent closure of one of its most incredible routes.
The timing on this really cannot be overstated.
No, it can't. If you're listening to this and you're someone who keeps a mental bucket list of travel experiences, the ecosystem we are talking about today is undergoing a permanent contraction.
It is shrinking. So to understand what we are losing, we first kind of have to understand the bizarre mechanical and economic origins of how this train even exists.
Yeah, let's start right there. Because to understand why people pay a premium for a 2-day version of a 1-hour flight, you got to look at the genesis of the company in the 1980s.
It's a great origin story.
It really is. This wasn't some polished concept generated in a Toronto corporate boardroom. It started with just 2 locals from Jasper, Alberta.
Right, you had a railroad engineer?
Yep, Harry Holmes.
Yeah.
And a tourism entrepreneur named Pat Crowley.
It is honestly the classic pairing of hardware and software.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because Holmes possessed the intimate mechanical knowledge of the track network, right?
The locomotives, the actual physical limitations of steel on steel.
Exactly. And Crowley, on the other hand, understood the psychology of the traveler.
He knew what people actually wanted to pay for.
Right. And together, they recognized this massive inefficiency in how people were seeing the Canadian Rockies.
So they developed a business plan for a sightseeing train, but they did it under one incredibly restrictive rule, right?
Yes. The daylight-only rule. It would only move during daylight hours.
Which is wild. So they took this pitch to Via Rail, which is Canada's national passenger rail service, right before Expo 86 in Vancouver.
And Via Rail actually went for it.
I know. They launched the service in May 1988 as this once-weekly daylight train between Vancouver, Calgary, and Jasper.
And to really sell the romance, they originally pulled it with a vintage Canadian national steam locomotive.
Which, that's a beautiful image.
It's stunning, but it's also a mechanical nightmare.
Why? Just because of the age of the machine?
Well, yeah. Running a steam locomotive through the Rockies in the late 1980s is incredibly resource-intensive.
Oh, because of the water.
Exactly. You are dealing with massive water requirements, highly specialized maintenance, and just the sheer operational friction of integrating a 19th century machine into a late 20th century freight network.
That makes sense. But, the romance worked. The demand was absolutely there.
It was. But Via Rail abandoned it almost immediately anyway.
And this is where the business mechanics get really fascinating to me. Because Via Rail is a crown corporation, right?
Yes, it's a government-directed entity.
Right. So their mandate isn't to provide luxury sightseeing. Their mandate is transportation. Just moving citizens from point A to point B.
Think about the economics of a national transit system for a second. Every single dollar spent subsidizing a luxury, slow-moving tourist train.
Is a dollar not spent on regular commuters?
Exactly. It's money not spent maintaining commuter routes or connecting remote rural communities.
So from a strict policy perspective, a purely sightseeing service is kind of a massive distraction from a transit agency's core mandate.
It is. So the Canadian government steps in during November 1989, and they essentially force Via Rail to divest.
They direct a private sector sale, but they aren't just selling a route on a map, are they?
No, they're selling the physical rolling stock and the entire book of business.
And the bidding war that followed, honestly, it tells you everything you need to know about the perceived value of this weird concept.
It really does. 20 different groups submitted initial bids.
20. That is wild for an unproven niche tourism product.
It sounds high, but the major players saw the potential immediately. I mean, the final 3 bidders included a group of Via Rail executives who were attempting a management buyout.
Because they knew what they were giving up.
Right. They recognized the cash cow they were being forced to abandon, and you also had Westcor's Holland America in the mix.
Which is a subsidiary of Carnival Cruise Line. See, that's the real tell right there. The cruise industry looked at this and immediately recognized it as a land cruise.
That's exactly what it is.
The entire economic model of a cruise ship, captive audience, premium hospitality, moving scenery, it applied perfectly to a train.
Precisely. But the winning bid didn't come from Carnival. It came from a Vancouver businessman named Peter R.B. Armstrong.
Right. And through a subsidiary, he acquired the branding, the route access, and 12 passenger coaches and 2 baggage cars.
12 coaches and 2 baggage cars.
That is a staggeringly small footprint for what would eventually become a globally dominant luxury brand.
Yeah, now operated by the Armstrong Collective under Tristan Armstrong.
But the reason they grew from 12 cars to an absolute empire is because they doubled down on the most consequential and, frankly, most logistically terrifying design decision in the history of passenger rail.
The daylight-only rule.
Let's really break down the sheer mechanical reality of this rule. Because on a standard passenger train, say Amtrak in the U.S., or a standard Via Rail route, the train is essentially just a rolling hotel.
Right. You have sleeping cars, you board, you eat, you go to sleep in a small berth, and the train just continues moving through the night.
You wake up 500 miles away. It's highly efficient.
But Rocky Mountaineer operates under a philosophy of curated visibility.
Curated visibility.
Yeah. When the sun goes down, the train does not keep moving. It physically stops at an intermediate location.
Primarily the city of Kamloops in British Columbia.
Yeah, exactly. And every single passenger must disembark. They get off the train, they get on motor coaches, travel to partner hotels, sleep in a stationary bed, and then reverse the entire process the very next morning.
Which, okay, let's talk about the logistics of that.
Yeah.
Because the invisible ballet required to make that seamless is just mind-boggling to me.
It's an immense operation.
You aren't just pausing a train. You are moving hundreds of people and thousands of pounds of luggage. Right. When you board in Vancouver, you hand your large suitcase to the staff. You literally don't see it on the train.
No, it goes completely out of sight.
While you are sitting in your glass dome, sipping wine and looking at mountains, a massive fleet of transport trucks is driving your luggage up the highway.
They are literally racing the train.
They have to beat the train to Kamloops, and then hotel staff take those hundreds of bags and place them into hundreds of specific pre-assigned hotel rooms.
So when you step off the train at 6 p.m.,
you're just handed a room key, you walk in your hotel room, and your bag is just sitting there at the foot of the bed.
The coordination required to execute that flawlessly every single day for 100 days a season. It is a staggering logistical achievement.
But isn't it jarring? I mean, to be forced off the train right when you're getting settled? It's like pausing a brilliant movie in the middle just to go sleep in another room.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the friction is the entire point. It's the ultimate structural guarantee.
A guarantee of what, exactly?
The company is essentially saying, we will not allow you to waste your money.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, think about it. If they had sleeper cars, human nature dictates you would fall asleep at 9:00 p.m.
Because it's a moving train, it rocks you to sleep.
Right. And you would completely sleep through the Fraser Canyon. You would sleep right past Mount Robson.
Wow. Yeah. You'd miss the whole reason you bought the ticket.
By forcing you off the train, they guarantee that every single kilometer of the track you are paying for is viewed under full sunlight.
It redefines the purpose of the vehicle entirely.
It does. The train ceases to be transportation and becomes a rolling theater.
Rolling theater.
Yes. The darkness of a standard sleeper car was the core enemy this entire company was engineered to defeat.
Which means if you're listening to this and you're booking this trip hoping for that romantic Agatha Christie experience of, falling asleep to the click-clack of the rails, you're going to be deeply disappointed.
Very disappointed. If you want a sleeper train, you need to book VIA Rails, the Canadian.
Right. Rocky Mountaineer is a completely different piece of machinery.
And that leads us nicely to the machinery itself.
The trains.
Yes, because once you establish when the landscape is viewed, you have to engineer how it is viewed. The architecture of these train cars radically alters the social and sensory physics of the trip.
We are talking about two specific tiers of service here, right? GoldLeaf and SilverLeaf.
Correct. But they share one foundational engineering concept: oversized glass dome windows.
And this isn't just an aesthetic choice. It's an actual geographic necessity.
Think about the geometry of viewing a mountain.
Okay.
In a standard train or even an airplane, the windows are vertical, flat panes of glass, and they're set below a solid horizontal roofline.
Right, like a normal house window.
Yeah, and if you are traveling across a flat plain like the prairies, that's totally fine. The scenery's beside you.
But in the Canadian Rockies, the landscape doesn't sit beside you.
No, it towers over you. You are sitting at the bottom of a V-shaped valley.
So with a standard roof, you'd just be looking at the bottom of a cliff.
Exactly. You'd have to crane your neck, bend forward, and press your face against the glass just to see the peaks of the tree line.
Which gets uncomfortable after about 5 minutes.
Right. The glass domes solve this by wrapping the transparent surface up and into the ceiling structure itself.
So you can just lean back.
You sit back in a reclined position and maintain a continuous sight line from the river gorge right below you to the glacial peaks thousands of feet above you.
But the engineering required to build basically a greenhouse on wheels, it has to be immense.
It's essentially a massive solar oven.
Right. You're in a glass box under the July sun.
Carrying 70 people. The HVAC systems required to keep a glass-domed train car comfortable under those conditions require heavy-duty, highly specialized climate control.
And it has to be integrated seamlessly into the carriage frame so it doesn't look industrial.
Exactly. Which brings us to the absolute pinnacle of this engineering, the GoldLeaf service.
GoldLeaf,
Yeah.
the custom-designed bi-level marvels.
They are literal two-story rolling buildings.
The upper level is dedicated purely to observation. Full-length domes, incredibly spacious seating.
But here's the mechanical feature that completely changes the sociology of the trip.
The rotating seats.
The seats on the upper level rotate a full 180 degrees.
Okay, I have to ask, is this just a fancy swivel chair gimmick, or does it actually change the trip?
Oh, it changes everything. Consider the acoustic and social practicalities of standard transit.
Okay.
If you are traveling with another couple or your family, standard forward-facing seats isolate you.
Yeah, you're either awkwardly twisting around, hanging over the back of your seat, or you're shouting across the aisle.
And annoying everyone else in the carriage. It's an exhausting way to socialize for 2 days straight.
So the rotation mechanism just eliminates that friction.
Groups of 4 can simply spin the seats to face each other. You instantly create a private pod.
Oh, wow.
You can share a quiet conversation, point out a grizzly bear on the riverbank, and just share a bottle of wine without ever raising your voice.
It transforms the carriage from a transit tube into a rolling communal living room.
And that communal separation continues downstairs, too. Because GoldLeaf cars are bi-level, they feature a dedicated dining room on the lower floor.
So you don't eat out of a plastic tray at your seat like on a plane.
No, you physically transition to a completely different environment. You walk down a spiral staircase into a dining car where hot meals are prepared on board.
Let's pause on that for a second. An onboard galley kitchen.
A fully functioning one.
Cooking high-end, multi-course meals. We're talking, what, Pacific salmon, short ribs, soufflés?
Yes, very high culinary standards.
For 70 people simultaneously, inside a kitchen the size of a walk-in closet, while hurtling around mountain curves at 50 miles an hour. I mean, the choreography of that kitchen staff must be like working in a submarine.
It requires immense precision and timing, but the result is a genuine restaurant experience.
And GoldLeaf also features that exclusive outdoor viewing platform at the rear of the car, right?
Yes, which is crucial for photography. You can take photos without the glass glare. And it includes all your beverages, premium wines, spirits.
And the dedicated onboard hosts who provide the historical and geographical commentary.
But there is a massive catch to the GoldLeaf cars.
A mechanical constraint.
An engineering limitation that literally dictates where in the world they can travel.
Oh, this is the part about the loading gauge, isn't it?
It's a fantastic detail. The bi-level GoldLeaf cars are incredibly tall, they have to be, to accommodate 2 full floors of standing room, plus all the HVAC and mechanical systems.
Right.
Because of this height, they exceed the standard loading gauge of many rail networks.
For anyone listening, let's just quickly define loading gauge. It's not just about the width of the tracks.
No, the tracks are standard gauge pretty much everywhere in North America.
Loading gauge is the invisible 3D envelope of clearance above and around the tracks.
Yes. It dictates the maximum height and width a train car can be before it crashes into a tunnel ceiling, scrapes the side of a bridge, or just hits a station platform.
And the loading gauge in the United States, particularly on the specific routes through the American Southwest, is highly restrictive.
Due to historic tunnel constructions and overhanging rock faces.
Which means the parent company, Armstrong Collective, cannot use these premium bi-level cars on their American route, Canyon Spirit.
Right, the route that runs between Denver, Moab, and Salt Lake City. The cars are literally too tall to fit through the American tunnels.
That's crazy. So the GoldLeaf bi-level experience is an exclusively Canadian phenomenon, dictated entirely by the physical dimensions of 19th century infrastructure.
It perfectly illustrates how modern luxury is still completely bound by historic industrial constraints.
It really does.
Yeah.
Now, for passengers who cannot, or maybe just choose not to, book GoldLeaf, there is the SilverLeaf service.
Yes, the alternative tier.
But, I mean, if I'm spending bucket list money on a once-in-a-lifetime trip, why would I ever choose the single-level car where the seats don't even rotate? It kind of feels like settling.
See, you're thinking about it as an airline upgrade, where economy is punishment and first class is the only way to be comfortable.
Is that not the case here?
Not at all. SilverLeaf is not economy. It is a highly premium, custom-built carriage. You still have oversized panoramic windows that curve into the ceiling.
So the visual access to the landscape is comparable.
It is genuinely comparable. The mountains look exactly the same whether you are on the first floor or the second floor.
Okay, fair enough. So what are the actual structural differences then?
Well, it's single level, so there is no downstairs dining room. Instead of transitioning to a restaurant, your hot meals are plated and brought directly to your seat by the onboard hosts.
Oh, I see. And the food quality.
The menu is excellent, though slightly less elaborate than the GoldLeaf galley output.
Got it. And the seats.
The seats are fixed facing forward. They do not rotate.
So you lose the private pod social dynamic we talked about.
You do, but you really have to look at who this service actually benefits. If you are a solo traveler, SilverLeaf is often vastly preferable.
Oh, that actually makes perfect sense. Because in GoldLeaf, if you go down to the dining room alone, you are likely going to be seated at a table of 4 with strangers.
Exactly. Some people love that. But if you want a quiet, introspective journey, having your meal brought to your seat while you watch the river go by is a much better experience. It's also ideal for travelers who simply prioritize the visual scenery over the elaborate communal dining experience, or who just want access to the daylight-only routing at a slightly different price point.
Okay, so you've built this perfect rolling glass bubble. You've solved the logistics of the luggage and the catering.
The hardware is ready.
Right. But a beautiful theater is absolutely useless without a spectacular movie playing outside. Where are they actually driving this machine?
They operate on distinct, very carefully chosen pathways through the Rockies. And the most famous of these, the foundational route, is the first passage to the west.
This is the one that connects Vancouver to either Banff or Lake Louise with that mandatory overnight stop in Kamloops.
Correct. And the reason it is the marquee route is because it traces the exact historical alignment of the Canadian Pacific Railway's original transcontinental line.
You are literally riding over the geopolitical spine of modern Canada.
Yes. In the 1880s, British Columbia was basically threatening to join the United States if the Canadian government didn't build a physical link connecting them to the eastern provinces.
So the CPR wasn't just a business venture.
Not at all. It was a desperate nation-building exercise.
And you get to witness the physical markers of that desperation from your seat, like you pass Craigalaki.
Which is the exact geographic coordinate where the historic last spike of the CPR was driven in 1885.
But the engineering highlights are much more visceral than just looking at a historical plaque, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Let's talk about the spiral tunnels near Field, British Columbia.
The spiral tunnels are a masterpiece of overcoming sheer physics.
They really are. When the railway was first built through the Kicking Horse Pass, they laid down a section of track known as the Big Hill.
And what was the problem with the Big Hill?
It had a grade of 4.5%.
Which, I mean, that sounds incredibly flat if you were driving a car on a highway. A 4% grade is nothing for rubber tires on asphalt.
Sure, but for a train, it is terrifying.
Why is it so different for a train?
Because the physics of rail travel rely on the incredibly low friction of a smooth steel wheel resting on a smooth steel rail.
Right.
It's highly efficient for rolling heavy loads on flat ground, but it means a train has virtually zero traction on a hill.
So a 4.5% grade meant what exactly?
It meant runaway trains, constant derailments, and massive required braking power. It was just totally unsustainable.
So in 1909, they engineer a solution. If you cannot go straight down a steep hill, you have to artificially lengthen the track to reduce the slope.
Right. They actually blasted 2 massive loops directly into the solid rock of Mount Ogden and Cathedral Mountain.
Wait, they just blasted a hole?
Yes. It's essentially a spiral staircase for a giant steel worm.
That is an amazing visual.
The train enters the mountain, slowly curves in a complete 360-degree circle entirely inside the dark rock, and emerges directly above or below where it just entered.
Having safely gained or lost the necessary elevation at a much more manageable 2.2% grade.
Exactly. And when you ride through it on the Rocky Mountaineer, the train is actually so long that if you sit in the middle, you can look out the window and see the front locomotive emerging from the tunnel above you.
While the rear cars are still entering the tunnel below you.
Yes. You are physically crossing over your own train.
That is a phenomenal spatial experience. But First Passage to the West isn't just about human engineering, is it? It's also about sheer geological violence.
Specifically, the transition through the Fraser Canyon.
This is an area that honestly perfectly justifies the daylight-only rule.
It really does. The speed of the geographic shift there is stunning.
You start your morning in Vancouver, surrounded by glass skyscrapers, sipping a latte at sea level.
And within 2 hours.
Within 2 hours, the urban sprawl vanishes, and you find yourself clinging to the edge of a steep-walled gorge, looking down at a river that literally looks like it's boiling.
You are entering the funnel of the Fraser River, and the choke point of that funnel is Hell's Gate.
I had to double-check the hydrology data on this when I was reading the source material because the numbers are almost incomprehensible.
They are massive.
Hell's Gate is a section of the gorge where the rock walls narrow to just 33 meters across.
Right.
And forced through that tiny gap is the entire drainage of the interior of British Columbia. We are talking about 750 million liters of water crashing through that slot every single minute.
To really put that into perspective, that is a volume of water greater than the flow over Niagara Falls.
Greater than Niagara Falls.
Yes, but compressed into a space the width of a suburban street.
It is a total sensory assault. The visual violence of that much water churning through stone, the sheer power of it. It's like a hard cut in a movie.
Going straight from a calm metropolitan drama right into the most high-stakes, intense nature documentary imaginable.
Exactly. Now, if First Passage to the West focuses on history and rapid geographic transitions, the second signature route is an exercise in absolute overwhelming scale.
Right, this is the journey through the clouds.
It shares that initial Vancouver to Kamloops segment, but then it takes a hard left turn.
Instead of heading east toward Banff, it tracks north and east toward Jasper, utilizing the Yellowhead Pass.
And the Yellowhead route offers a completely different aesthetic. You have exclusive visual access to things like Pyramid Falls, which drops, 300 feet right near the tracks?
Yeah, and it's practically invisible from any public highway. The only way to really see it is from this rail corridor.
But the undisputed climax of this route is Mount Robson.
Mount Robson isn't just a mountain, it's a geological monolith.
It is the highest peak in the Canadian Rockies. It stands at 3,954 meters.
That is nearly 4 vertical kilometers of rock rising straight up from the valley floor.
Which is just staggering.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, what's fascinating about Mount Robson is how it interacts with the atmosphere.
Oh, right. Because it's so massive that it operates as its own weather-generating engine.
Exactly. Through a process called orographic lift.
Meaning the mountain literally forces moist air masses upward, causing them to cool, condense, and instantly form clouds and precipitation around its peak.
Regardless of the weather in the surrounding valley.
That's incredible.
It creates a permanent, localized microclimate. It is shrouded in its own self-generated clouds for the vast majority of the year.
Which is why the route is called Journey Through the Clouds.
It completely reframes your relationship with the landscape. I mean,
Yeah.
when you are sitting in a luxury GoldLeaf dome, eating a chef-prepared meal, it's very easy to feel a sense of mastery over nature.
Sure, you are safe, warm, moving efficiently.
But then you roll to a stop at the base of a rock so impossibly large that it literally dictates the weather. It enforces a profound realization of human smallness.
And nature doesn't operate on a tourist schedule.
No, it doesn't. Seeing the peak of Mount Robson clearly, completely free of clouds, is considered a highly rare event.
It is a genuine stroke of luck.
The mountain reveals itself on its own timeline, completely indifferent to the luxury train idling below it.
Now, if you are listening to this and you are paralyzed by choice-like, you want the historical engineering of the spiral tunnels, but you also want the sheer scale of Mount Robson. The logistics actually allow for both.
Right, this is where you look into booking a circle journey.
It is a brilliant logistical loop. You take first passage to the west from Vancouver to Banff.
Okay.
Then you disembark and you do a massive 232-kilometer overland transfer via motor coach. You drive from Banff north through the mountains up to Jasper.
And that transfer isn't just a boring transit day. You are driving the Icefields Parkway.
One of the most ecologically significant roads in the world.
You stop at the Columbia Icefield. You can literally walk on the Athabasca Glacier. You see Peyto Lake.
And then, once you arrive in Jasper, you reboard the Rocky Mountaineer and take the Journey Through the Clouds route back to Vancouver.
It transforms a linear trip into a comprehensive immersion. You cross the Rockies twice, utilizing two distinct mountain passes.
Viewing two entirely different river systems.
And effectively doubling your chances of clear weather and wildlife sightings.
It all sounds so permanent. You know, you were talking about mountains that dictate the weather, steel tracks laid down in 1885, glaciers that have been there for millennia.
You would naturally assume this luxury tourism ecosystem is as unshakable as the granite it rolls through.
Exactly. And that assumption brings us to the most critical, urgent section of this deep dive. Because beneath the luxury branding and the permanent geology, the actual operational reality of passenger rail travel in 2026 is shockingly fragile.
It really is. We need to look closely at the third signature route in Canada, the rainforest to Gold Rush.
Right. If you are listening to this and you have any intention of experiencing this specific route, you need to understand that the window is permanently closing.
Let's define the route before we explain its demise. The rainforest to Gold Rush is sort of an outlier in their portfolio.
It runs from North Vancouver to Jasper, but it takes a wild, sweeping northern trajectory through Whistler and Quesnel.
It is their longest Canadian itinerary. It takes a full 2.5 days, requiring 2 separate overnight stops.
And geographically, it is incredibly diverse. You climb out of the lush coastal rainforests of British Columbia, navigate the sheer drops of the Chicamas Canyon.
You cross over into the arid, high desert environment of the Caribou Gold Rush region, complete with dramatic formations like the Painted Chasm.
And finally, ascend into the Rocky Mountain Trench.
It is also widely acknowledged as the ultimate wildlife corridor.
Because it traverses far more remote, less populated areas than the southern routes.
Exactly. So your statistical probability of spotting black bears, grizzly bears, bald eagles, and osprey directly from the train is massively increased.
It is the ultimate wilderness rail experience.
Mm-hmm.
And after the 2026 season, it is completely ceasing operations. How does an award-winning luxury brand just lose a route? Don't they just say, no, we're driving our train here?
This raises an important question regarding infrastructural dependency. This is the ultimate bottleneck of the asset-light luxury travel business model.
Asset-light.
Yeah. You see this award-winning brand with custom-built trains, and you naturally think they control their own destiny, but they only own the software.
The glass domes, the brand, the chefs.
Exactly. The hardware, the literal iron rails bolted to the earth, belongs to someone else.
And freight economics will always trump tourism economics.
Precisely. Let's look at how freight networks actually monetize trek. The specific rails the rainforest route uses between Squamish and 100 Mile House are owned by Canadian National Railway CN Rail.
Right.
For a multinational freight giant like CN, a stretch of track is purely a conduit for tonnage.
We're talking coal, lumber, grain, intermodal shipping containers.
If those rails aren't moving millions of tons of profitable cargo, they become a massive liability.
Because maintaining track in the Canadian wilderness is exorbitantly expensive.
You are dealing with avalanches, rock slides, washouts, freeze-thaw cycles destroying the rail bed.
Right. Nature is constantly trying to reclaim it.
Exactly. So CN Rail evaluated that specific northern subdivision and determined it was no longer economically viable for their freight routing.
And so on March 30, 2026, they announced they intend to discontinue operations on that line.
And if CN abandons the track, they stop maintaining the signals, they stop clearing the rock slides.
And the track essentially reverts to wilderness. Rocky Mountaineer cannot simply drive their train over unmaintained track.
They're entirely at the mercy of their industrial landlord.
It highlights the precarious nature of luxury travel relying on industrial bones.
It really does. The fact that a spectacular luxury passenger train utilizes that route a couple of times a week is completely irrelevant to a freight company's multi-billion-dollar bottom line.
Because a passenger train doesn't generate freight revenue.
In fact, on busy lines, passenger trains are often viewed by freight dispatchers as highly annoying obstacles that disrupt their heavy cargo flow.
So the infrastructure disappears, and the tourism product vanishes with it.
Rocky Mountaineer CEO Tristan Armstrong has stated they would gladly return if another operator takes over the line and maintains it, but the reality is bleak.
The route is confirmed, closed for 2027, and it is not on the schedule for 2028.
It is a stark lesson in the fragility of access. We assume the wilderness will always be there, safely curated for us.
But our access relies entirely on industrial supply chains that care absolutely nothing for the view.
The practical takeaway is absolute. 2026 is the final opportunity.
If the Caribou Gold Rush territory and the remote grizzly corridors are on your list, you book it now or you never do it.
But the company is adapting to this contraction.
Yeah, they aren't just sitting still.
No. To stabilize their 2026 offerings amidst this route closure, they have introduced a highly strategic, limited-run route called Passage to the Peaks.
This is essentially a specialized Band-Aid for June and July of 2026, but it's brilliantly conceived.
What makes Passage to the Peaks unique is that it is the only route that entirely ignores the Pacific coast.
It never touches Vancouver.
It operates exclusively within the interior mountain ecosystem, running directly between Banff or Lake Louise and Jasper.
Utilizing the tracks through Kamloops as the midpoint.
Exactly. It solves a very specific logistical nightmare for a massive demographic of travelers.
Imagine you fly into Calgary from Texas or New York. You rent a car, you drive to Banff. You spend a week hiking and exploring the Rockies.
Previously, if you wanted to experience the Rocky Mountaineer, you had to commit to riding it all the way out to the ocean in Vancouver.
And then figure out how to fly home from a completely different province, which is a massive headache.
Passage to the Peaks eliminates that friction entirely. It allows a traveler deeply embedded in the Rockies to experience the Glass Dome overnight luxury rail experience without ever leaving the mountain corridor.
You get the spiral tunnels, the Continental Divide, and the approach to Mount Robson, all within a tight interior loop.
It's an incredibly smart pivot. But with routes closing, new routes opening, and multiple service tiers, the ecosystem is undeniably complex.
Right. If you are listening to this and thinking about pulling the trigger, you need to clearly understand if this is actually the right product for you and how to properly build the logistics around it.
We have to establish the negative filter first.
Okay, who should avoid this?
The daylight-only, highly curated philosophy naturally rejects certain types of travelers.
Like if you are looking at a map and thinking, I need to get from Vancouver to Jasper quickly for a family event, you will hate this train.
Do not book it. The intentional friction stopping in Kamloops, the slow speed will drive you insane if your goal is mere transit.
Similarly, the price point eliminates budget backpacking.
Yeah.
You are funding a mobile fine dining restaurant and complex luggage logistics.
Exactly.
So who is the ideal passenger, though?
It heavily targets milestone travel.
50th anniversaries, retirements, multi-generational family reunions.
The controlled environment of GoldLeaf,
Right.
the rotating seats, the lack of logistical stress, it is engineered for celebration without exhaustion.
There is also a huge cohort of Eastern North Americans who want to see the sheer verticality of the Rockies, but are terrified by the logistics.
Renting a car, navigating treacherous mountain passes, dealing with unpredictable weather.
Picking 5 different hotels.
Yeah.
Rocky Mountaineer acts as an operational shield. You sit in your dome, and they basically bring the wilderness to you safely.
And alumni who have done this often look at the U.S. counterpart, Canyon Spirit, running Denver to Moab. It's the same demographic. But there is a massive caveat to that operational shield.
Right, the train is only a centerpiece, does not cover your entire vacation.
This is the reality check of the what's included list.
Yeah.
From the moment you step onto the train platform on day one to the moment you step off at your final destination, you are covered.
The meals, the drinks, the motor coach to the Kamloops hotel, the hotel room itself, the luggage transfer, it is all seamlessly handled.
But the frame around that picture is your responsibility.
Exactly. They do not fly you to Canada.
Yeah.
They do not book your pre-trip hotel in Vancouver. They do not book your post-trip hotel in Banff.
Which is why planning requires a much broader view. If you start in Vancouver, you need to realize it is a primary global destination. You don't just fly in the night before.
No, you allocate 3 or 4 days to absorb Stanley Park, Granville Island, the whole culinary scene.
Then you have the train journey itself with that overnight in Kamloops. And, let's manage expectations about Kamloops.
Oh, we definitely need to do that.
Yeah.
Kamloops is a hard-working interior city sitting in a semi-arid valley.
It is not a polished alpine resort.
Right, you aren't going to Kamloops to spend 3 days browsing boutique art galleries or taking gondola rides.
It is a functional, pleasant, and entirely mandatory interlude.
You arrive, you eat dinner at a local restaurant, you sleep in a comfortable bed, and you get back on the train. It is a pit stop, not the destination.
But the destinations are world-class. If you end your trip in Banff, you are entering one of the most highly developed, heavily trafficked resort towns in North America.
You have the historic Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel. You have access to Lake Louise.
It is spectacular, but it is busy. If you choose the northern route and end in Jasper, you are choosing a very different vibe.
Jasper is the wild frontier compared to Banff.
Jasper National Park is over 11,000 square kilometers, significantly larger than Banff, but the town itself is much less commercially developed.
If your priority is seeing an elk walking down the sidewalk or spotting a bear foraging on the edge of town, Jasper is where you want to be.
It feels much closer to the raw edge of the wilderness.
When you combine the pre-trip city stay, the train journey, and the post-trip national park exploration, you are really architecting a comprehensive 10 to 14-day expedition.
And as we step back and look at that entire expedition, the underlying philosophy of this deep dive becomes incredibly clear.
The Rocky Mountaineer is a masterclass in dismantling our modern obsession with efficiency.
By physically refusing to travel in the dark, by refusing to rush through the canyons, they force you to actually bear witness to the geology.
They strip away the anesthesia of fast travel.
But the closure of the rainforest route is the crucial warning here. The infrastructure that allows us this comfortable access is not guaranteed.
2026 is the closing window. If you want to ride those specific rails, the clock is quite literally running out.
It forces us to confront how we interact with the wild.
It really does. And I want to leave you with a thought about that interaction. Think about the profound irony of everything we've discussed today.
It's quite a paradox.
To access the most pristine, untouched, deeply remote wilderness on the continent, places like the Fraser Canyon or the base of Mount Robson, places largely inaccessible by any road, we rely entirely on heavy industrial iron tracks.
Tracks that were originally blasted through the rock with dynamite and steel.
A violent effort specifically designed to conquer and tame that very wilderness. Is true wilderness best experienced by leaving civilization behind, hiking in with a tent and a backpack? Or is there a strange, beautiful validity in bringing the absolute finest comforts of civilization, the bi-level glass domes, the rotating seats, the perfectly poured glass of wine, right into the very heart of the wild?
It's fascinating tension.
When you sit in that train and look out at the mountains, are you seeing nature? Or are you just observing the incredible, fragile industrial lines we've managed to draw across it? Something to think about the next time you book a ticket. Until next time.